Welcome back, everyone, to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Asha Nayaswami, who has been a student of Kriyananda, I believe, since 1969. She's a spiritual director from Ananda Palo Alto since 1987, the author of several books and a worldwide teacher. And she was recently brought to my attention by Isha Das. And I've been looking over her website, which is ashajoy.org. And there's so much good information there in the articles and letters. I'm really happy to have you with us today, Asha. Thank you for being here.
It's my great joy. I'm so glad that we were connected.
Yeah. So I've just got a few ideas that we could go over today, mainly around your advice and recommendations for beginners on the path and when people become more engaged. But before we do that, since this is my first time interviewing you, would you mind telling us just a little bit about your introduction to Kriya Yoga and if there's anything you'd like to share about your relationship with Kriyananda?
Oh, well, there's a lot. I could share about all of that. I was I was born a truth seeker. From of just a very young age, I was always very intent on knowing what was true and why it was true. And I was very confused when I was younger because nobody seemed to be actually asking the questions that seemed like the most important questions to me. I had a very good family, educated, very refined. I actually thought that maybe they had more wisdom than they were sharing with me, and that at a certain point they would sort of bring it out of the closet. But as I got older and older, I realized they had fine values, but they didn't have the avid need to know on the level that I did.
Right.
So by the time I was 18, I had found the books of Ramakrishna
Mhm.
and Vivekananda. And as soon as I saw Vivekananda's book, just the first pages, it was like, this is what I've been looking for. And so for several years, I just explored the spiritual path primarily through the saints and through the yogis. There was a very good metaphysical bookstore near where I lived, and I just went to the saints and masters, and I just basically read through it. But it left me without anything to do. I was born in a Jewish family, so I couldn't be a Protestant missionary. I couldn't be a Catholic nun. And I was honestly just too timid to go to India and just to see what would happen. It never crossed my mind.
Right.
But I was completely persuaded of God realization as the goal of life. But I was living in this apartment in San Francisco. I was going to work in the morning. I was coming back, spending time with my friends, going to work the morning the next day. I really honestly thought I'd lose my mind if
Hmm.
I had to keep doing that. And because Divine Mother is very gracious, she introduced me to Swami Kriyananda. And
Hmm.
literally as soon as I saw him before he spoke, he just walked into the room. Past lives is the only explanation. But he exemplified what it meant to be an integrated, joyous, free, expanded, truth knowing individual. And I just felt wherever he is, whatever he's doing, that's what I want to do. And just to make it more fun, he was starting a community up in the hills. So it was not just a teaching, it was like a whole way of life. He had a retreat. So the other element was there, which is that I could look for truth myself and I could share it. And it was literally, I would say, a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
It took me a year to extricate myself from things that were holding me, but I uh, I moved I moved there in the spring of 71, and I have never looked back. I've been
Yeah.
I've been integrated into Ananda ever since. I didn't know anything about anything, and I specifically remember asking Swami Kriyananda. He was having a Kriya Yoga initiation, and I'd been living there by that point about 4 months, and I had a decent meditation practice. Things were a little bit more informal then.
Mhm.
And I sort of said, "Can I take Kriya?" And he said, "Of course." And I was so startled. I was just completely startled. Really, really, I can do this.
That's great.
So I did.
Yeah.
September of 71.
Yeah. So you did you meet him? Did I have that right? Did you meet him in 69 and then 71? Is that when you got?
That's what, and then I moved at the very end of 69 and the very beginning of 71 is when I moved, a little more than a year. You have karma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took a little, but I just set my intention and then I just had to work it out with the people that I was entangled with, basically.
Right. Yeah. So in 71, is that when you kind of moved into the Ananda community, and have you been in that
Absolutely.
ever since?
I lived for 16 years. I lived out in the rural community, which is now called Ananda Village near
Uh-huh.
Nevada City,
Uh-huh.
where the retreat is and all. And then I was there just steadily for 16 years. And then in the last 4 or 5 years of it, my work actually became traveling
Mhm.
and teaching. I either, from the very beginning, I either taught at the retreat that we had there or I was on the road. Well, let me back up. Before that, I cooked. Then I actually worked as Swami secretary, Kriyananda secretary for a few years. And the whole reality of it was that Kriyananda is a direct disciple of Yogananda. He was presenting his guru's teachings with an enormous amount of attunement and creativity. And I felt like I was at the epicenter of all understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I lived next door to him for most of those 16 years. And then he asked me to come and help really establish another community in Palo Alto, Silicon
Uh-huh.
Valley. And I've been here since 1986,
Okay.
except in the last few years, I've also just been back on the road again, except this time it's on the airplane.
Right. Yeah. How often are you traveling and teaching throughout the year? Like, what's your schedule usually like?
Well, I just did some statistics, and I tend to live in the moment, but I
Mhm.
asked my friend who travels with me. In the last 4 years, we've been to 50 cities in 23 countries.
Wonderful.
So that's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
I I have some responsibilities here still,
Yeah.
so it keeps me here sometimes. I
Yeah.
just want
Well,
to go.
it's
Yeah,
clearly a powerful mission then. I mean, to be able to do that and reach so many people, it's wonderful.
I feel I just won the lottery this
Yeah.
incarnation. I don't know what I did, but I must have done a lot of good stuff to get this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Your story, when you mentioned seeing Kriyananda the first time, that was a similar experience I had with Roy, with Mr. Davis. I hadn't even heard him talk yet. And it was just, oh, yeah. Well, a little more than, oh, yeah, but you know.
No, no, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. The actual intuition I had when I saw Kriyananda was, and I didn't even know where the words came from. It said, "He has what I want."
Mm,
And
mm,
in my whole life, I had never met anyone whose life I wanted to emulate.
right.
They all, I mean, I was educated and relatively speaking privileged, and I could have done anything,
Mhm,
or at least theoretically.
right.
And nothing seemed worth doing to me. Nothing. And I was quietly not losing my mind, but I was quite on the edge of losing my mind.
Yeah.
And then I saw somebody who was living a life I wanted to live.
Yeah.
That was that.
And you didn't even have to go to India for that to happen.
Oh, and he's American, so he didn't even speak with an accent.
Yes. Yes. Wonderful. Good.
Yeah.
Um, so what I've been thinking about, with your level of experience and expertise in this field and wisdom and so on, we have a lot of people who are just beginning the path, meditation and Kriya Yoga, and I'm curious from your experience, what are some insights or advice you might have for beginners to become established in their practice?
Well, good company is worth a lot. If you can connect yourself even to one or two other people, preferably to a bigger reality. Now with the internet, you can connect yourself to anybody anywhere on the planet. But good company is also a matter of personal choice. If you're really serious about going in a spiritual direction, you can't continually fill your inner reality with contrary influences, whether it's music or television or people or habits. And however, the fastest way to make progress is slowly and patiently.
Mhm.
And spiritual change, it grows exactly like a plant grows, which is to say the whole potential is in the seed, but the seed is not going to become the apple tree in just a day or a week or a month or a year. And there is no stage between being a seed and an apple tree that you can skip.
That's wonderful. Yes.
And if you get impatient and try to force the sapling to grow faster, you'll generally kill it.
Yeah.
So the first thing you have to understand if you're just beginning on the spiritual path is this is a total transformation, and total transformation takes a little time. But as long as I'm moving in the right direction and doing the best I can, and that's all you can do, to let go of that which doesn't serve me, you have to measure your success like a featherweight on a balance scale. As long as you're adding just a little more to the side you're trying to become, that's success. And I say all this, listen, I've been doing this for like, 55, many, I mean, a number of years. It sounds absurd to me when I think back to when I started to have imagined that number. But because of that, I have seen what happens. And I've seen those that are just going to get there in 1 week, they're gone in 6 days. And the people who just realize that this is simply what I'm going to do, and even to realize it doesn't matter if I do it badly, because those who succeed are those who don't give up. So you really want to relax in for the long haul, and 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 then pay attention to your environment, because what happens is we lose contact with the dynamic potential if we're all by ourselves. So as much as possible, form alliances, not merely passive alliances, but active alliances with people who are on your same wavelength. I mean, nowadays, your best friend could be in Nepal and you can agree to meditate together, whatever your shared time zone is. And just having a partner will cause you to show up.
Right.
And someone to talk to. I mean, those are just some of the ideas, but those are important ones.
Yeah, those are extremely important. I think we could spend probably 10 talks on on that alone. Focusing on the idea of good company is definitely a big one. And Mr. Davis, my teacher, would always speak to that. How do you, when you're meeting someone who's sincere, when they're struggling with that, it sounds like you were pretty intense from the beginning. I felt like I was pretty intense from the beginning, and I might have personally made some decisions where I just said, I'm not talking to you anymore. And that's a little bit over the top, maybe. But how do you recommend people to integrate that so that it's not, I guess, traumatic?
Well, for one thing, what I was going to say is don't cast your pearls before swine. But what I mean by that is don't expose yourself to other people's doubts when you yourself are just beginning. And if you make radical changes and kick people out of your life, you're going to activate a response from them.
Yeah.
So to a certain extent, just begin to change yourself and don't feel the first thing that you have to do is external. The first thing you have to do is internal.
Right.
First thing you have to actually begin to study, to practice, to whatever it is that is inspiring you. And then and take a quieter, more observing picture of the people around you. And also you have to ask yourself, is there unhelpful influence actually coming from them, or is it in my reaction to them?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And to what extent can I first control myself before I try to control them?
Mhm.
And speaking of the apple seed and the apple tree, nature never makes sudden leaps. It always grows in an organic, natural way. So see, sometimes this is how you practice what I have lovingly called boing back spiritual life,
Okay.
where you push it so far out so fast that there's no foundation. It just boings back on you.
Yeah, that's good.
But you feel like I'm so serious because look, I've thrown everyone out of my life. Better just form a relationship with the divine, form a relationship with God. Don't think that your intuition is full born the first day.
Right.
So you have to develop some other source of magnetism that will give you the strength to move away from that which is not helpful. But if you have no other source of magnetism, and you just strip yourself of everything you're accustomed to, you can't help yourself. You'll just run back. And
Yeah.
then you'll get the idea in your head that you can't do this. If you go out to try to be a pole vaulter and you start at 18 feet or whatever the records are these days, you're not going to do it. You have to start
Right.
you want to have victories at the beginning. So you get the thought into your mind, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, that inner form of magnetism, those weren't the exact words you used, but what I've noticed is oftentimes people come to Kriya Yoga and meditation, and they're not necessarily always, I guess, what I might call divinely inspired. They didn't come to it and say, oh, I want to know God. They want to maybe feel a little bit better, things like this. But, as the years go by, we do see that is extremely important, that connection to your Ishtadevata and inner divinity and so on. For a beginner who might maybe even struggle a little bit with those, the idea of divinity and God and so on, it might sound kind of silly to you, but
and I remember.
yeah, how would you speak to them?
I think call yourself a truth seeker. Be interested in what's true, and therefore don't decide that don't decide without some intuition or evidence that something is either true or false. Just be interested in what's true and function at the level where you really have faith in it. And in fact, one of the very good suggestions, Sister Gyanamata, one of Yogananda's the most advanced woman disciple, you need to actually make sure that your feet are on a place where you have real faith. And if the only thing that you know is that I feel I sleep a little better if I meditate, I'm a little less nervous if I meditate, then that's your truth for the moment.
Right.
And then from that solid ground where no part of you can argue with it, then you find out, well, I there was a time when I didn't know this. So I wonder how many things there are in front of me that I don't yet know that will gradually become the solid ground on which I stand.
Right.
So the first time I ever heard the concept of a divine mother, which I now say very freely, this man, it was my first visit to the ashram that I moved into up to Ananda village. He was a grown man and he was talking about mother did this and mother wanted that. And my thought was that he's pretty old to be just doing what his mother wants him to do. But some of the things he was saying were very unkind, and I thought she was a pretty rotten mother in addition to everything. Then I found out he meant divine mother, God, and it actually made it worse. It did not make it better. It was just as crazy for me. I didn't disbelieve, but it had never occurred to me to think of it like that. But there was too much else that was true, that I knew was true. And all my years with Swami Kriyananda, because I was in my early 20s when I met him,
Mm-hmm.
he said many, many things that I couldn't reject because I knew he was a truth teller, but I couldn't accept because I also had respect for my own intelligence.
Right.
And Swami Kriyananda himself said he read Autobiography of a Yogi in 1948 in September. He was in New York City. He took a bus across the entire United States. Yogananda was living in Los Angeles. He walked into Yogananda and said, I want to be your disciple.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Roy Davis also has a
Yeah.
dramatic recognition story. But Swamiji's, interestingly, he said, I accepted Master as my guru and his wisdom unhesitatingly,
Uh-huh.
but not unquestioningly. That's
Right.
how he put it. And that was exactly me. When Swami would say something that seemed completely nuts to me, which a lot of things he did say, I couldn't throw it away and I couldn't keep it. So I kind of like packaged it up and I had like a shelf over here in my brain. And I just kept it there like an ugly present from an aunt that you can't discard.
Right.
But then over the years, gradually, as I had more experience,
Yeah.
I began to unpackage one after eventually I unpackaged everything. And by the time I took it down from that shelf, I had changed. I mean, it was exactly the same, but now had been too big when I first got it. Now it fit me.
Right.
The way you really hurt yourself is without any basis you reject. That's what really shortens your spiritual life. But it's equally wrong if without any basis you accept. because then you have no foundation. You're just on shifting sands all the time.
Yeah.
So you just are respectful and respectful of yourself.
Right.
Let's just see where this goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Davis once told one of my brother disciples. He said, if you believe 90% of what I say, we're probably all right. He said, if you believe 100%, you're probably crazy.
That is a simple way to put it.
Reminds me a little bit of that. Well, I don't mean to get off the topic where I wanted to go, but this is getting interesting specifically for me, and I'm sure the audience will appreciate it too. So for you then, how would you describe that point where it moved from this hearing someone talk about, say, Divine Mother or divinity in that way, and then you yourself kind of recognizing the experiential, I guess, truth behind it?
The truth behind it. I mean, there was a time, it was some years later, but at a certain point, Swami Kriyananda gave me the advice when I presented some complicated psychological issue because I was a very complicated person. And he said, "Oh, don't worry, just give it to Divine Mother," which was basically the same as him speaking gibberish to me. It meant absolutely nothing. And then a number of years later, I heard myself give someone else that exact advice. And that was the point at which it's just sort of like almost in a shocking, creepy way. How did I get here?
Right.
Because I was by no means brainwashed. I'm just incapable. Nobody could brainwash me. At least I don't believe they could.
Right.
So I knew it was myself. But okay, let me start with reincarnation, because that was the first one I had to deal with, being I'm an American person in a very Western culture of an age just before all this was common,
Right.
when cultures were much more separated. Reincarnation, because of past lives, because of reincarnation, I was interested in it. But what I started doing was I started experimenting whenever there was an issue that I didn't quite a scene with people or with myself. I would try out the template of reincarnation to see if it made more sense, if it would work. And I did that very conscientiously, and I just found out that if reincarnation were true, a great deal of other stuff that made no sense at all would actually begin to make a great deal of sense. And I began to make much more sense to myself, because if instead of just trying to find something that happened after I got into this body, because I would have real experiences that had no rational explanation if it was only one lifetime,
Right.
including my response to Swami Kriyananda. And I married and divorced at a relatively young age, but the man that I married, who was a very fine man, we actually separated because his spiritual path was not Ananda and mine was.
Yeah.
He went on to become a disciple of Ananda Ma. So it was it was very real. I met him, we were together after 15 minutes. And just virtually inseparable until our lives really diverged. Like, how does that happen? Okay, now to come to Divine Mother. Like, Divine Mother is to present the idea, I'm using that there is the divine is personal and compassionate and unconditionally loving. I mean, these are highly desirable qualities. Mm-hmm. Instead of a God who's always judging you and feeling that you're wrong, it's also highly desirable to have an inner relationship with a power like that. So not as consciously as I did reincarnation, but I started trying to imagine that I was actually loved. And I tried to imagine, because motherhood, not in this incarnation, but in other incarnations, is something I understand. I know that a mother really loves her children. And I know that the children don't always see what the mother's doing as an expression of her love.
Right.
But the mother knows that it is. So I began to watch mostly my own life in this case, but also the lives of others. I would begin to watch my own life and how many times I was convinced that I was abandoned and nobody cared for me and nobody who loved me would give me this experience. And then what do you know? As time went by, the very thing that I thought was a punishment was actually a reward, was actually a training, was actually opening a door. If I had gotten what I wanted, nothing good would have come from it. And there was no human intervention.
Right.
It was just the way things began to unfold. And once again, if I'm here and I don't know something, and then I learned this much, but it was completely unknown to me before I knew it, how much is above me?
Right.
At what point? And then, of course, the example, and you had the wonderful example of Mr. Davis, and I had Swami Kriyananda. You see people behaving in life in ways that are, how do they do it? You know? And so and even if you're not with them, you can read about them, where these days, see people on screen all over the place. How do they do it? And when they start explaining to you, if they do, about God and karma and reincarnation and Divine Mother and Guru, and they're living something, you can feel that they didn't just read it yesterday, memorize and repeat it.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like everything else, it's the apple seed becoming a tree.
Yeah.
When you look at the apple seed, you really don't know how it should become a tree, but it's inherent in that apple seed. Same here, it's inherent within us to be as great as the greatest. But how do we get there?
Right.
Here, let me just add one more. You'll enjoy this because we follow the same path. Master said that he remembered his individuality, being the jiva, the individual spark of spirit, all the way down to the level of a diamond.
Huh.
Now, what that means is the whole concept is completely, and I got to ask Swamiji one question. I said, how long does it take to get out of being a diamond?
What did he say?
He said, that's a really stupid question. He said, what would you do with that information? Like, how would that help you? I said, because by that point I was very comfortable. I said, I thought it was a very interesting question. And then he sort of like wasn't going to answer. But then he said, all time is short compared to eternity.
Right.
Which wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was an interesting one. But going back to this, but if Master, the entity which became Yogananda, that means every single stage of awakening, from being a crystal diamond to being a God-realized master, it's not that merely that he has sympathy for our problems. I mean, I have this picture in my mind of all the gurus sitting around wherever they sit around, and they talk about, so-and-so disciple is doing this particular thing, drinking, murdering people, being adulterous, maybe not meditating. I mean, you can go up the scale. Everything that happened. And it's not merely that they're sympathetic. They say, oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that's good.
I remember that.
Right.
And so their compassion, their capacity to take us through it, their capacity to sympathize with what we're dealing with, because they stood there. Just exactly like you say, someone who comes up to you and asks you a simple question. I can't give up eating hamburgers. I still love hamburgers. Some days marijuana is just what I want, whatever it might be. Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
I understand why you're doing that because I remember.
Yeah.
If I don't remember explicitly like a master would, I remember the desire to dull my consciousness. I remember the desire to indulge in intense sense experiences. I'm not that far away. I remember.
Right. Right.
And it also makes you confident that you can come out of it. If I could come out of it, you could come out of it.
Yeah. Oh, going along with that, the idea of dulling the consciousness. We talked about surrounding yourself with helpful people in their states of consciousness and so on. What would you say to what would be a good, just very basic piece of advice beyond that to help people start to recognize the benefit of not dulling their consciousness? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense to me. But you know, there are three major delusions: money and the power that money gives you. I mean, the power of money is the false sense of security and the capacity to influence, but that's
Mm,
it's characterized as money.
yeah.
Money, they say wine, but they mean intoxicants.
Mhm.
And sexuality, of course. These are the wine women in song, is how they used to say it before it was improper to put gender identities on that
Right, right.
song. Wine women and gold, yes.
Yeah.
But I, it's just the desire to the un, the unbearableness of always being myself.
Mhm.
I mean, this is everybody has their own. I find the fact that whenever I'm not sound asleep, and even then, if I'm dreaming, I'm still myself. As soon as I wake up, there I am. And very, very often the feeling inside of me is something that I would rather shift. Just the belief that if I can just escape from my own individuality, even for a short period of time, it'll be better. I mean, sleep is the same thing. So my first feeling is you have a you're up against a real issue. You know, this is not something trivial. This is not like I would rather have two pairs of shoes instead of one. I mean, you're up against the actual real issue that drives us to spiritual life. And the absolute only way a person will get over that is when they really know it doesn't work.
Right.
Because as long as you think it's going to work, you're going to keep doing it. And you just have to get to the point where it does not give you what you hope it's going to give you, or the price is too high to pay.
Yeah.
Either one.
Would you, I mean, would you also say you have to also kind of be really clear on what it is you actually really want too, right? Because if you don't
Exactly.
know that,
That's exactly right. That's why it's all integrated. That's why it's one of the major delusions.
yeah.
But the other side of it is, you see, consciousness is to be awake, and aware is extraordinarily challenging. And because it means, see, this is why truth is really your goal. Who am I? Who am I really? Where does my happiness really come from? Is anybody else responsible for my inner consciousness except me? And I would really like to have different answers to those questions. I mean, even after all this time, it's not, I am at the point where I am absolutely convinced that there is no alternative. But I also know that, there's a lot of firewalking that's required between here and freedom. I mean, we used to joke about it. I used to call it the icky middle, is what we called it. You've committed yourself to spiritual life. It was the Bali High sort of thing. There's the island out there. It's so beautiful. You dive off the shore, you start swimming like crazy, and then you realize the island's a lot farther away than you thought. But you're too far from shore to turn back. And our conversation was, you're treading water and thinking about it and seeing what your options are. But you can't, you have to go forward. But that is a very high level of spiritual commitment.
Mhm.
When Swami Kriyananda was asked what's necessary for success on the spiritual path, among the other many things he said was, when you just realize it's a matter of life or death, there's no choice.
Mhm. Mhm.
And a lot of times I've seen people who otherwise are not spectacular, from what you would think of as progress. But I realize that their progress is very, very great because they have understood that there is no option. And even if they have a lot of really hard karma to go through, there's just no other option.
Right. Yes. That's a whole other whole other class of 10 sessions. Wow, you just really pack it in. Well, for the sake of, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. Um, for the sake of our time that we have together,
Okay.
just a little bit more about this process. And so, once an individual is now on the path and meditating daily and taking care of their, the drama around them and so on, and they're, maybe 3, 4, or 5 years in,
Right.
um, you got to be curious, but how do you, or what do you recommend for people so that they don't get complacent and
Right.
that they are actually still truly becoming clearer rather than just plateauing?
Right. Well, yes. For one, it's hard to gauge your own progress, but
Yeah.
yes. Here's what I've seen when I used to teach beginning meditation classes, which I did decades ago, but I did it a lot. Okay, you're so excited about the spiritual path and meditating now. Let me tell you why you will quit.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Interesting. Well, tell me why
One,
that
one
happened.
reason you'll quit is that you do not continually re-inspire yourself by bringing new energy into what you're doing. What you're doing becomes rote. You are not continually curious and expanding. You're not changing your music. I mean, people often music forms consciousness. You're bringing into your space too much that has a vibration that's not consistent with what you're trying to do, and you're not consistently bringing into your space, by that your inner space, but your external too, that which will encourage your spiritual life. How are you spending your time? What kind of music are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you watching on television? And I'm not, you have to be balanced. It's not like you can be so radical, but you need to start moving the whole thing up. And if you're on one hand trying to meditate, and on the other hand, you're consistently neutralizing your upward moving efforts, in other words, you have to keep re-energizing it. You have to take new classes. You have to go on new retreats. You have to go places where inspiration is. You have to find new books, new companions. I mean, on a continuous basis. So there's always exciting. You have to up the ante a little bit and spread your practice around. Don't just think your 20 minutes or your 30 minutes, your hour is enough. Are you helping anyone? Are you paying attention to the rest of the day? Are you just being your same selfish, self-centered, concerned person? Are you giving anything to anybody? Which is another way of bringing new energy into your system. So you realize you're putting less and less energy into it. You need to keep re-inspiring yourself. And here's a very interesting thing. People often quit because it begins to work, which I know is strange, because we think begins to work means that I have these out of body, magnificent experiences and see astral realms and so on. And maybe you do. But the other way it really begins to work is you really begin to change. And you also become much more self-honest. And sometimes as people really begin to see who I actually am and how I really behave, they don't want to know. This is where intoxicants comes in. I just don't want to know. And it begins to work because they begin to see this is a really big project. I heard Master say that you have within you a portable paradise. And I read that line when I was about 20. And I decided that by the time I was 25, I would have absolutely unfettered access to my portable paradise. I totally made that up. I just made that up. And then I used it as a dogma, you know. But what happens, fortunately for me, by the time I got to 25, I had a whole nother world had opened to me because I was adding fresh energy into my story. But I also began to realize what I'd gotten myself into. And so your meditation awakens you to what you've gotten yourself into, and then you don't want to know. So if I stop meditating, then it won't be true anymore.
Right. Yeah. That brings me to a question. Do you still have a little bit of time, or should we wrap it
I
up?
have as much time as you have.
Okay.
I have a really open afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, I do have another appointment, but I think this might be an interesting one to get your take on.
Okay.
Um, you know, how do I put it? Over the last many years,
Mhm.
it's become very clear to me. Well, yes, it's become clear to me. So I'm curious your take on this. That you can't have both. That you
Okay.
can't have all this stuff of the world
Right.
and that uh, I feel that it's going in a direction, and to go in that direction, really, truly, you have to let go of all of this stuff. And the more you try to hold on to the stuff, you're actually holding yourself down a bit. So the summary of the statement is that you can't have both. You have to give yourself completely to the world or the divine. And I'm not talking about for beginners, I'm not talking about for intermediate. I'm talking about, as you mentioned, when you know you can't go back. Do you have any thoughts or reflections on that?
Okay. Now, what Master brought, and what you saw with Mr. Davis, I saw with Kriyananda, of course, um, is that we integrate spiritual life into a life that looks more or less normal.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, marriage, children, careers, homes. We're not with the begging bowl and the one cloth and the cave. This is
Right.
a new age and spirituality is coming in. So you can't have the world, that's a big phrase.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't mean it in the,
No, so
yeah.
so what I wanted to say is, but what you're talking about is internally. And it's very subtle. It's like where I mean, and it's all through the chakras. It's like every chakra has a certain quality that is essential to be a balanced human being. And every chakra gives you the opportunity. Do I actually try to establish that quality by reaching outward and making the world look a certain way? Or do I establish that quality by seeking from the divine light
Mhm.
have that quality? The earth chakra is the most obvious and easiest to talk about because that is security.
Right.
So, do I get my security from money, from the fact that I have people in my life who will take care of me? I'm established, I'm well respected. Is that my source of security? Or is my security the fact that I know that Divine Mother is in charge of my life and whatever she brings me is going to be for my best?
Right.
And that doesn't mean that you don't work, save money, have your IRA,
Yeah.
have nice people in your life. But it's a question of where does my actual sense of security come from? And there you're absolutely correct. If you are going to say, I'm going to get everything set up, and that's going to make me safe, you're as vulnerable as you were the day you started. But if you've taken that energy and turned it so that all the energy that runs through your inner self is guided from the spiritual eye, and each chakra is not acting itself out, what I call the horizontal level, but the energy, and then that energy, divinely inspired, energizes the first chakra, and the first chakra then has a great money making scheme and makes a lot of money and has a wonderful family and has all those things. And if they're taken away, which inevitably everything goes away, it's not that we're not untouched. We feel it, we mourn it. Swami Kriyananda said something to me very interesting once to me. These are among the many things he said. Because I accept things calmly. He said, you think that I don't feel them very deeply. He said, I feel them much deeper than most people do, because he doesn't protect himself against feeling, but he still accepts it calmly. This is heartbreaking. This is terribly disappointing. He says, not at all what I had hoped to have happen. But there's still a piece of you that is not disconnected from the upper reality, but you're not defined. by what you're doing. And you're absolutely right. There is no choice. You cannot have it both ways. You can look like you have it in all directions,
Right.
but you can't actually have it except God alone.
Yes. Well, thank you. I personally appreciate that. And again, I'm sure the audience will too. It helps me as well. The way you described it, it helped to put it into a context which I think will allow me to communicate that better. So thank you.
Very, very good. No, but it's threading a needle.
Yeah.
And then every time you feel, I mean, our natural state is perfect bliss. So anything that interrupts the perfect bliss is somehow not truthful in the highest truth. We're not quite there yet. Yeah. But that the understanding is that doesn't mean that I become unfeeling. Many times people try to accomplish that by basically deadening their feelings, and that's not freedom, because there's fear in that. And perfect love casts out all fear.
Yeah. Well, I think that might be the most perfect thing to go out on right there.
As you wish, my friend.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It was good meeting you, and it was good speaking with you.
Very, very nice. I feel just the same way. It's nice to have a new friend.
And if people would like to, find out more about your work, we mentioned your website, www.ashajoy.org, and you also told me before we got started that you also have a YouTube channel as well.
I have a YouTube channel and Instagram. I have a friend who does all this for me. I have TikTok. If you just type my name in anywhere, I'm all
Asha Nayaswami.
Asha Nayaswami. I'm everywhere.
Okay. True in more ways than one, right?
So.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah. It was a joy. Yeah. Great joy. God bless you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Kriya Yoga Podcast. To learn more about Kriya Yoga meditation, you can visit us at kriyayogaonline.com, where you can find information about current book releases, online classes, and in-person retreats throughout the year. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, visit us at the Kriya Yoga Online Patreon community at patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.